When the first trailer for Elden Ring Nightreign dropped at last year's Game Awards, the reaction was one of shock and confusion. Another Elden Ring game so soon after the last one. And it seems to be some sort of co-op multiplayer thing. What's going on? But there was one moment in particular that got FromSoftware fans out of their seats. Hang on a minute. Is that the Nameless King?
Nameless King! What are you doing?
A boss from Dark Souls 3 is going to be in Elden Ring. No, seriously, what the hell is going on? As it turns out, yes, Nightreign is actually bringing back bosses from previous FromSoft games. During the game's network test, we also saw the Centipede Demon from Dark Souls 1 make an appearance as a boss. And the developers later confirmed that the Duke's dear Freya from Dark Souls 2 will also be there. This reveal was absolutely mind-blowing, but it also got me thinking, if FromSoftware are planning to bring back bosses from their previous games, why these ones specifically? And also, there are so far only 3 bosses confirmed, but that doesn't mean there won't be others too. What other bosses would it be great to see given a second chance? Let's start by examining the 3 bosses we already know about. Centipede, Freya, and Nameless. It'd be fair to say none of them are the best boss in their respective games. Nameless comes closest, with the second half of the fight in particular being a brilliantly intense one-on-one duel. But the first half, also known as the King of the Storm, has constant issues with the camera trying to follow the dragon in flight, and it can be very difficult to figure out where attacks are actually coming from. You also spend a not insignificant amount of time trying to run to the dragon when it does land, and often by the time you get to it, it's already gone again. Freya is one of Dark Souls 2's better encounters in a game full of mediocre bosses, but it can be a frustrating one. The additional spiders that constantly spawn are more irritating than challenging, and the fact you can actually softlock the boss by removing both of the spiders' heads before its health is depleted is a significant issue. It's also a very drawn out encounter, and one that sees you spend a lot of time simply running from one head to another more than actually fighting the boss itself. As for the Centipede Demon, well, it's a mess to be honest. The Demon Ruins and Lost Izalith are notorious for how unfinished they are, and in many ways Centipede feels the same. Its limbs flail about in ways almost impossible to predict. The arena is a sea of blinding lava and safe spots seemingly placed at random, and the ease with which you can glitch the boss out of the arena speaks to a lack of overall polish. My point here is that what I believe these 3 bosses all have in common is missed potential. Great ideas that just didn't hit the mark in terms of execution. FromSoftware are reintroducing these bosses specifically so they can have another go at their development, in a game that may be more suited to their mechanics. Elden Ring Nightreign is the perfect opportunity to look back through FromSoft's history and consider those boss fights that could have been fantastic, but weren't able to make the landing for one reason or another. I've trawled through the memory banks to present a few bosses I believe could benefit from the second chance at life that Nightreign is affording. Let's go back to the beginning of the Souls series, to one of the most frustrating encounters of Demon Souls, the Maneaters. This pair of flying gargoyles are considered one of the most challenging encounters in the entire game, though that's mainly to do with the precarious arena you face them on. You'll die far more often by being pushed off the bridge into the abyss below than by any of the attacks they do. But as actual enemies, I think they're quite enjoyable to fight. But they are also really janky. Their AI behaves erratically, flying off and hovering away from danger potentially for minutes at a time. Their animations feel clunky and awkward, and on more than one occasion I've had one of them actually clip into the bridge below me, getting stuck and making the fight unwinnable. So yeah, there's a lot that could be ironed out with these 2. We have had other fights like this in FromSoft titles, like the gargoyles in Dark Souls and the Belfry gargoyles in Dark Souls 2. We even had a version of the encounter in Elden Ring, with the twin Valiant gargoyles in Nocron. But as we all know, that fight sucks. Of all the bosses in Demon Souls, the Maneaters are the ones that feel like with a bit more time, a coat of polish, and a changed up arena, they could be a great battle to revisit. Dark Souls 2 had a lot of boss fights. Like, a lot. And it's fair to say quite a number of them left a lot to be desired. So there are plenty to choose from that could be improved upon. My choice would be Mithther, the baneful queen in Earthen Peak. The concept behind this boss is actually really strong. A decapitated Lamia from Greek mythology who slithers around the arena, heals using poison, and throws her own head at you to cause damage. It's both inventive and offers tons of scope for boss design. Sadly, the final product didn't really meet this potential. Partly that's down to the engine of Dark Souls 2, which means things like animations and visual effects feel outdated and underwhelming by comparison to today. The way it used its arena and the poison within didn't help either. In case you've forgotten, the arena is full of poison that drains your health and heals hers, unless you set fire to a metal windmill, with no prompts or hints that you can actually do this, and no previous examples of anything like this even being possible. But imagine what FromSoft could do with this idea now. Incorporating the smooth animations and combat of the serpents from Volcano Manor, the bombastic explosions from the final fight in Shadow of the Erdtree, and the poison arenas of the Lake of Rot or Caelid Swamp. Now that is a boss I'd like to fight. The Demon of Hatred, as well as being one of Sekiro's most difficult and secretive boss encounters, is also one of its most divisive. For a game so focused on parrying, deflecting and riposting in its combat, a giant flaming demon you have to dodge and jump around to avoid feels a bit out of place. Many debate whether it better resembles something else of FromSoft's previous work, Bloodborne, and if the boss was actually cut from that game and shoved into Sekiro simply to pad out the roster. Which is why I think it's perfectly placed to be a part of Nightreign, because the Demon of Hatred is actually a really good boss, with a wide array of well-telegraphed attacks, and enough bombast to fit in perfectly with Elden Ring's other encounters. Plus, it would be really interesting to test the fan theory on whether the encounter is better suited to Bloodborne's gameplay. After all, Elden Ring's combat takes far less from Sekiro than it does from its other games. Having the opportunity to face this giant beast with a variety of mechanics, other than that which Sekiro offers, would be enjoyable, and help us see how great the fight really is without this current baggage. Okay, this is a slight left turn, but I have a theory on this. Elden Ring didn't have any PvP bosses specifically. The closest we came to that is the penultimate encounter of the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC, where we battled against Needle-Light Leda and her allies, potentially alongside several allies of your own. However, that fight was still PvEvE, with no opportunity for integration with the summon system to invite invaders into the fight. In fact, there have only ever been 3 examples of boss fights in FromSoft history that have utilised the invasion mechanic. The Old Monk in Demon Souls, the Looking Glass Knight in Dark Souls 2, and Half-Light Spear of the Church in the Dark Souls 3 Ringed City DLC. And that's a shame. Anyone who played Demon Souls back in 2009 will tell you just how incredible it was that a game could actually feature another player as a boss fight. Well, when they weren't cheesing you with Firestorm the moment you walked into the Fog Gate anyway. But it always felt to me like the last time they attempted it was the one with the most missed potential. The Ring City had 4 boss fights, and 3 of them are considered some of the best of all time. The other is Half-Light, a version of the Old Monk fight with 2 Painting Guardians from Dark Souls 1 thrown in for good measure. It all felt a bit half-baked, as if FromSoftware wanted to put a PvP fight in without knowing exactly what to do with it. But Nightreign gives them an incredible opportunity to combine its 3-player co-op gameplay with the concept of the Half-Light fight, and essentially create a Battle Royale style boss encounter. Imagine walking into an arena to find this adjudicator, who welcomes in your party and another party of 3, and has you fight to the death in order to complete your Nightreign run. Now that would be awesome. For the super secret final boss of one of the greatest video games ever made, for an omnipotent god whose will you've enacted throughout the course of your journey, for the final climactic battle of man versus something greater than he can ever comprehend, the Moon Presence is a bit meh. It's not a bad fight by any means, with a variety of sweeping attacks, charges, and that one move where it puts you down to 1 HP from anywhere in the arena. But considering the scope of what this thing is supposed to be, it doesn't really live up to that. Digging into the game's cut content though, it seems the fight was actually going to be much larger in scope. Hidden among the game's Chalice dungeon files is an unfinished version of the Moon Presence fight, featuring this defiled creature with malformed growths and a generally more alien design. Nightreign could give FromSoft the opportunity to realise the Moon Presence in the way they'd originally intended. Maybe they could combine both of these boss encounters in some interesting way. Maybe they could expand upon its original design and incorporate some of the elements we see in other battles with godlike beings. Maybe it could even give us some clues to the unanswered questions as to the outer gods of the lands between. I'm just speculating at this point, but certainly Moon Presence is a boss with a lot of missed potential. Alright, settle down, let me explain. Dark Souls 1's punching bag has always had a bad rap. A boss placed in the latter half of the game's progression that poses almost no threat whatsoever, and has so little health it falls over just by blowing on it. Coupled with a tragic and slightly pathetic backstory, it's fair to say most are dismissive of Pinwheel as nothing more than a small bump in the road on the way to Nito. Which is precisely why I would love to see him pop up as a boss in Nightreign. Because in my opinion, Pinwheel has the most untapped potential of any boss in the Souls series. A twisted mage with the ability to teleport and clone himself around the arena, firing off magic spells that explode on impact and throw you off guard. A dark necrotic backstory that hints as to something genuinely sinister and horrifying. Yes, we have seen these concepts executed with other bosses before, like the Crystal Sage in Dark Souls 3 and the Lamenter from Shadow of the Erdtree. But it's something I still believe FromSoft can do better. Imagine the reaction if Pinwheel showed up during a Nightreign run, only to turn out to have a boatload of health, be incredibly fast and do a shitload of damage with every meteoric attack. I think that would be worth the entry fee alone. So that's just some of the bosses I think deserve a second chance in Elden Ring Nightreign. What about you? What bosses would you like to see FromSoft have another go at? Let me know in the comments down below. And make sure to subscribe so you never miss another video.